Just started the recording. I'm going to give it one more minute and I will admit folks. All right, I'll go ahead and admit everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll give it a few more seconds to let some more people trickle in, and then we'll get started. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our deep dive, how workforce boards can help communities start a second chance hiring program. My name is Pooja Tripathi, and I'm Senior Director of Workforce Initiatives at the Manufacturing Institute. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We'll be recording this webinar, and we'll share a link with all registrants after the event, and it'll be posted on our website as well. All participants' microphones have been muted upon entering the meeting. Please ensure you remain on mute throughout the webinar. We encourage you to enable speaker view in the top right corner of your screen for best viewing during the discussion. Lastly, please utilize the chat feature, and we encourage you to use the chat for any questions that you may have for our guests today. So to get started, the Manufacturing Institute is the nonprofit workforce development and education affiliate of the National Association of Manufacturers. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and empower the manufacturing workforce of today and tomorrow through a diverse set of initiatives. The MI has partnered with Stand Together Trust since April of 2021 to help manufacturers implement second chance hiring. We thank them for their continued support of our second chance work. So you may be asking why we got involved in second chance hiring. There are a few very important reasons.
Hey everybody, my name is Amanda Dorico and I'm the Senior Manager of the Foundation.
Could I ask everyone to mute, please?
Association. I'd like to welcome you all on the FIA's panel session on the power of active listening hosted by the FIA Workforce Development Committee. This webinar topic was selected by FIA members through a LinkedIn poll, so thank you to all. Before we get started, I want to go over a few logistical details. This is a live virtual webinar. So if you guys have any questions, please post in the chat box and we'll address them during the Q&A portion of the webinar. We will monitor the chat box throughout the presentation. Make sure you're in a space where you can control the noise and interruptions. Check your settings to see that your computer volume is turned up, not just in Zoom, but on the actual computer itself.
All right, let's get this started. So there are a few very important reasons why we at the MI got involved in second chance hiring. Filling the manufacturing skills gap is critical. Manufacturers will need to fill 4 million jobs by 2030, with 2.1 million of those jobs potentially going unfilled. 1 in 4 Americans currently possess a criminal record. Many in the sizable talent pool are often excluded from the workforce when they could be given a second chance and help manufacturers fill these incredible unfilled roles. The MI engaged in second chance hiring with 2 desired outcomes. 1, to improve manufacturers' perception of second chance hiring and the opportunities this strategy could afford them in finding committed employees. And 2, to increase partnerships between community-based organizations, specializing in assisting second chance individuals with manufacturers looking to hire. Second chance hiring helps companies expand their talent pools, decrease turnover, stay competitive, and access incentives. It's been well documented that second chance hiring increases retention and access to a diverse talent pool. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, African Americans make up 13% of the US population, but 38% of its population in prisons and jails. In the state of Georgia, where the MI's 2022 Second Chance Hiring Employer Cohort Initiative took place, African Americans make up 31% of the resident population, but also 60% of its prison population, according to the Georgia Department of Corrections. The U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics estimates say that Native Americans are incarcerated at more than double the national incarceration rate. Over the last 2 years, the MI has initiated 5 different pilots. 2 of them have been community-based, one of those in San Antonio and another in the Atlanta, North Georgia region. The other 3 were with companies that wanted to implement this as an enterprise solution. We developed our Second Chance Hiring Toolkit with the help of Envoy based on what we learned from these 5 pilots. Later on, we'll dive into how you can utilize our toolkit at your organization. I want to emphasize that manufacturers cannot do this alone. There are oftentimes partners in our communities, like all of you, local workforce boards, who can help connect to this talent and help manufacturers navigate second chance hiring. With the support of partners like Envoy, manufacturers, and community-based organizations involved in our pilots, the MI has also developed case studies, videos, and other support resources available to everyone on our website. Today, we'll hear from Matt Joyce, partner with Envoy, Cassie Sproul, managing director with Envoy, Jesse McCree, Patricia Blumenauer, and Brandy Hahn. I'm thankful that they are willing and able to share their experience, knowledge, and insights with us on community collaboration, employer engagement, and leadership, and how our toolkit can help all of you with your own second chance hiring journeys. After we hear from them, we'll have a brief Q&A, so please add any questions you have for them in the chat. To set the foundation before we get started, I want to review some common phrases and terms that you will hear during today's session. Fair chance and second chance are both common phrases used interchangeably. So we'll use words like hub organization, which is really an organization that plays a central role with local employers and other community-based organizations to bring everyone to the table. Ecosystem is really the local network of employers, organizers, and reentry organizations that support and or recruit job seekers with justice impact. A pilot is a hub organization's first effort to really mobilize employers in the region around a shared second chance learning and implementation support, or an employer's coordinated effort to implement a second chance hiring strategy. Community partner is an organization typically at the intersection of work readiness and reentry that partners with an employer to help meet their talent needs and address retention challenges through referrals and ongoing support through ongoing feedback loops. And justice impacted is a job seeker who is impacted by the justice system, typically with a conviction or arrest record. To lead the next part of our conversation, I would like to introduce Matt Joyce, partner at Envoy Advisory, a social impact consulting firm with a focus on implementation strategy. Envoy's Fair Chance Employment practice partners with employers and associations to develop inclusive hiring practices to recruit and retain candidates with past convictions. Envoy supports clients including individual companies, associations, and industry leaders to build and grow fair chance strategies. Previous to Envoy, Matt served as Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Center for Employment Opportunities and the Executive Director of the Greenlight Fund in Philadelphia. He lives and works in Brooklyn, New York, and has been an incredible partner to us at the MI as we have built out our Second Chance Hiring Initiative. Welcome, Matt.
Great. Thank you, Pooja, and thank you all for having us. Really excited to jump into this content. I'm going to preamble very quickly and get right to Jesse and the conversation, but we'll just share. We've had a chance to work with the MI over the past 2 years on its Second Chance initiative, and I think one of our goals up front was to really provide relevant guidance to the manufacturing community on how to implement second chance, fair chance initiatives within their companies. think one of the learnings through that has been how much of this work is local in nature. And even for national companies that hire in multiple markets, the implementation of second chance practices really happens with local partners on the ground with hiring managers in those communities. And so I think that's sort of what brought us to this conversation about how do we think with local leadership about building ecosystems within geographies locally to bring together employers, to bring together workforce leaders, reentry leaders, corrections folks, and starting to think about, what does that template look like? What does it mean to have a local ecosystem? And I think first and foremost, you need leadership. And so this is where I'll invite Jesse onto the screen. So Jesse McCree leads SCPA Works, the workforce board for South Central Pennsylvania. I've known Jesse for almost a decade now. Jesse has been doing second chance work probably before we called it second chance work, really prioritizing justice impacted job seekers as a priority population and working with employers in the region to think about the best ways to both recruit and hire and ultimately support those employees. So Jesse, thank you for being part of this. And I'm going to jump right into questions. Feel free to say any words of introduction, but would love for you to share just how your work in Second Chance has evolved over the last decade. You've obviously been working with reentry organizations, serving job seekers coming back from the justice system for a long time. But tell us, what does this look like, and where are we now? How are employers thinking about this, and how is SCPA Works as a workforce board kind of playing a central role in being a convener?
Yeah, no, thanks, Matt. It's great to be a part of this conversation with you. I think when we met and we were starting a lot of this work, I had 4 fewer kids and a lot less gray hair, but it's still phenomenal to work with you. And this work, most importantly, really is incredibly impactful. There's a lot to cover here in a short amount of time. I think briefly, a couple high-level thoughts. First is the ways in which we've seen this work change and evolve over time, I think is somewhat or directly correlated to the fact that this really is or should be like the golden age for workforce development. And when I say the golden age for workforce development, I mean when you have structurally low unemployment rates, and you have employers across the country who are saying that the number one challenge for their business is to find and to retain the skilled workforce, that puts the demand side at a place where they're ready to invest their time, their resources, their energy in ways that when you have unemployment rate that's much higher than that, that volitional choice to say we want to be involved in helping people who are on the sidelines get into the labor force maybe isn't there. So I think there's a really important point here, which is that this really should be an opportunity for workforce boards and chambers of commerce and community-based organizations to really lean into this idea of now is the time for employers to be more heavily invested time, energy, resources in getting people who are on the sidelines into the labor market. So that's the first thing. And I think that is really sort of led a lot of these changes. If you look in the past 10, 15 years, as easy as it is to be pessimistic, there is a lot to be grateful for in some of the progress here. And we've seen a lot of legislation around banning the box, about expungement and sealing records. This has all been market progress around fair chance hiring. There's increased employer awareness and participation, I think, in a way to say, how do we collectively as a region make sure that we are doing everything to support fair chance hiring? So when we look at that, I think there's been tremendous strides made, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing here locally in South Central Pennsylvania. But it's not been without the bumps on the road, right? There's still the stigma that doesn't just get changed because it's low unemployment and companies are looking for workers. Navigating some of the legal and regulatory landscape is still a challenge in this space. So we've seen tremendous progress, still a lot of bumps in the road. And when we talk about some of the work that we're doing regionally, which we can dive into in a few minutes, Matt, I think we've seen tremendous traction around this work and partnership with you and Envoy. It's just been a wonderful partnership.
Well, let's dive into the work that you're leading. I think first we probably need to define ecosystem. Let's sort of get a sense from you all. What does it mean to bring together the right partners to do this work? Who are those partners? And I will just say as commentary, what I love about working with workforce boards broadly and specifically SCPA Works is you do serve both constituencies of employers and job seekers, right? You're designed to be an intermediary in the middle and having sort of both as your clients. And I think it's a really important thing to think about, how you bring all the parties to the table who need to be there to make second chance employment part of the talent strategy in the region. So tell us how that works in South Central Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think you described it really well. So we view, and I know a lot of the people attending this webinar who are on workforce development boards would view themselves in a similar way as connectors and conveners in their community. And so by nature of our work, we exist in this intermediary, sort of this honest broker between the two important sides of the labor market, supply and demand side. So when we hear on the demand side, we're looking for workers, and then we see individuals walking into our American job centers who have been justice involved, formerly incarcerated. We're seeing a really unique opportunity for us to connect the dots. And so in terms of an ecosystem that gets built, it actually comprises much of what workforce boards they themselves are comprised of, right? Employer driven, right? So employers have to be a key component of this. We see, re-entry organizations and re-entry management organizations being a big part of this. Educational institutions, training institutions locally are a really key part of this. We've also seen increasingly community-based organizations providing holistic support, financial literacy, even things, some of the non-employment and training components, such as housing, being able to obtain a driver's license. That happens, to your point at the very beginning, that happens best locally. Right. So workforce boards, building those relationships with CBOs, education training providers, employers is really key. One of the things that I know we were going to talk about, but I think it's an important part of this is one of the things that we haven't fully cracked the code on, although we're starting to make some progress in, is philanthropic funding, particularly around this idea of collective impact. They are an important component, an important partner to be a part of this ecosystem. We're really grateful for a lot of the federal funding, such as WIOA, but we're seeing that importantly, in order to really move the ball down the field with fair chance hiring, we need to embed philanthropic and foundational support into that ecosystem from the very beginning, not just simply we've built this ecosystem and now we're hoping to get funding somewhere. So that's a lesson that we're learning, is to deeply engage funders early in the process, helping them to help us design the right kind of ecosystem for our region.
Great. And I'm curious, you mentioned a little bit about just responding to the demand, right? Job seekers who are coming in and the barriers those job seekers might face. Same thing on the employer side, right? Employers looking for talent in a tighter talent environment, having to think more thoughtfully, creatively about that. I'm curious internally, when you make fair chance or second chance employment a strategy of your workforce development board, you say explicitly, this is a population we want to focus on. What does that look like? Are you doing convincing and persuasion internally? Was that just a natural fit? Can you talk about how you sort of elevated second chance as part of your strategy?
Yeah, it's another great question. I think, so one of the things that we would talk about is, so we take a very consultative sales approach to our business services. So when we're going to talk to a business in our region, in the Harrisburg metro region or the York, Pennsylvania region, we're talking to businesses and we're hearing what their pain points are. And then we're able to begin to have the conversation around, well, where are you recruiting from? Or what are your traditional pools of recruitment? They've run dry. That's why you have this challenge. And so it opens up this door to say, there are many strategies that we're working on to help you as a business have the technical acumen, the expertise, and the operational muscle to be able to start to recruit from maybe labor pools that you haven't thought about before. That's the opening. On the workforce board side, we've made that a strategic priority, in part because of our sort of North Star of driving economic mobility in everything that we do, right? So I mean, on that side, it's an economic mobility conversation for our funders and for our workforce board. And on the employer side, it really is, let's be a problem solver for you to help you find talent in places that you haven't looked before. And I think this is part of the stigma, honestly, Matt, is that we don't often lead with fair chance hiring. We're actually framing it up as it's a demand-driven need for your business, and we can be sort of on that consultative sales side. Now, once you have that I think has reduced the stigma around formerly incarcerated or justice involved. And from there, what you actually see is many of the employer champions that have supported this work, Flagger Force, Opportunity Construction, just to name a couple, have really bought into this idea that it's that triple bottom line, right? That it's going to be good for the business, it's good for the job seeker, it's ultimately good for the community. And I have to say, that's the optimistic side of me, is that we've seen so many businesses, once they get past the bottom line, they say, we actually want to support this work even more because it's the right thing to do. So hopefully that answers your question. I mean, I think it definitely starts demand, but I think very quickly moves into, this is going to be good for the bottom line, but it's ultimately going to be good for our community.
Great. And I know you touched on philanthropic funding, but I want to just go back quickly there, because I think for workforce boards in particular, where you work within a set of allocations that are sometimes a little constrained in what you can do with them, you might have to get a bit creative to think about how to fund the expenses that come with that, whether that's convening or whether that's technical assistance or support to companies. Can you talk a little bit about where you've been able to find funds and resources and sort of how creative you've had to get there?
Yeah, it's definitely still a work in progress. And we've made it as a workforce board, another one of our key strategic pillars is diversifying our funding, right? We're grateful for the allocations that we have, such as WIOA, but we know that we need to diversify, right? So, there are local community-based organizations that don't necessarily have big dollars, but can provide a ton of in-kind support, right? So we have, the Goodwills and the New Hope Ministries locally are community-based organizations that are really on the ground helping justice-involved individuals all the time. Then we have, organizations like the United Way that have been able to be supportive. And then we're also starting to look at larger organizations, bigger funders, or maybe a couple extra zeros at the end of that are driven by the idea of increasing economic mobility, right? So the Strata Educations and the Lumina Foundations, and that see that this is actually tied into really important work on a much larger scale about increasing economic mobility. So like I said, we are still in the early stages, I think, of maximizing the potential here. But one of the things that I'm really encouraged about is that we've built a culture as an organization and as a region to say that this isn't a matter of should we do this, it's how do we do this in the best way. And we've had tremendous outpouring of support from some of these philanthropic organizations as well, that otherwise wouldn't have been interested in working with us, and now say this is really critical work. So we're very excited about that.
Great. So we're going to bring you back in for Q&A. So I'm going to ask for the 20-second answer to where's the field going in the next 5 years, in your opinion? What do you see as, 5 years from now? What are we talking about? What's different? Give the quick answer now, and then you can elaborate in Q&A when we come back.
Still going to be the golden age of workforce development, right? That's not going to change. So the skilled workforce challenge will still be an issue. And so we are going to have to dig deep to make sure that we are bringing everyone into our communities from the sideline that need to be there. But I do think we're going to be talking a lot about how technology is disrupting occupations, and particularly those that it might be a little bit more lower wage, lower skilled work. And I think it's important and critical for us, if we're going to support this work, to ensure that people can still keep up with the changing dynamic labor market that will be disrupted greatly by technology in years to come. It's probably 35 seconds, but close enough.
Great. Well, Jesse, thanks so much. This is great. Again, we'll come back for Q&A, but just appreciate both your contributions here and just your leadership in this field. It's exciting to follow the blueprint
Thanks so
that
much,
you all
Matt.
have laid.
Appreciate it.
And Pooja, I will pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Matt and Jesse. Now I'd like to welcome Patricia Blumenauer, Chief Operating Officer at Philadelphia Works, and Brandy Hahn, Program Manager for the Workforce Recovery Program at the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Welcome, Brandy and Patricia.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Hi there, great to be here today.
Awesome. So I have just a few questions for the both of you on how your organizations have partnered with employers, workforce boards, and community-based organizations to start and sustain such great programs. Patricia, I'm going to kick it off with a question for you. As the city's workforce development board, Philadelphia Works develops and manages workforce solutions that respond to business needs and increase economic opportunity for Philadelphia residents. What role does Second Chance Hiring play in achieving those objectives for you all?
I think Jesse put it really well with the idea that talent is tight. So one of our roles is thinking strategically about what the talent pipeline looks like in all different types of ways. And we have employers that come to us with this question often, like, how are we going to fill these positions? How are we going to get where we need to be as a company? And Fair Chance Hiring is a no-brainer in this aspect. This is a pool of talent that is available, that oftentimes is ready to work. And so we have actually been lucky enough to have employers come to us to say, help us do this. How do we do this? How do we do this well? So we've had to be really smart about building partnerships with folks that can kind of help us get along the way. But it needs to be a priority. So we have to be constantly looking at what resources we have available, how we are able to assist employers and the folks that are looking to gain the jobs as well. So it's sort of a combination of being strategic, building the partnerships, and then also kind of having the vehicle to make that match happen.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Brandy, for you, the Kentucky Comeback Initiative was launched by the Chamber in 2020 to transform the way that Kentucky approaches criminal justice and substance use disorder. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So 2020 obviously was the year of change for the entire world, really. So that, the pandemic just highlighted really an issue that had been going on for years. So if you look at a publication that was put out by the Chamber, it's called 20 Years in the Making, and that's for a reason. These things were going on. The pandemic just really highlighted and brought it to the surface at a greater level. Kentucky was the third lowest in workforce participation in that time. And so, Kentucky realized we have to do something. We are lower than any other state that touches us except for West Virginia. And the next closest would be Ohio, and we're several percentage points below them. So it really just was kind of a supply and demand. We have to do something. And so we took a strategic look at it. Obviously, the Chamber is a business-led organization, and we just went to the businesses and said, hey, we've got to figure out a solution. So legislation was involved that kind of kicked things off with Senate Bill 191, which actually was turned into law, that actually gives employers some protections if they have folks that test positive in their environment, or someone that's applying. It gives them those legal protections to keep those people employed and steer them towards treatment. So that was kind of the kickoff of what we are now implementing with the Fair Chance Academy, and that's the KTEP program is what was referred to in that law, and our plan operations that we're doing with our partners. So it's really just was, obviously substance use disorder is not the only factor of impacting the workforce. You've got childcare and aging workforce, all the things that are impacting every employer. But in Kentucky especially, we knew substance use disorder was going to be a major game changer, and we were going to have to look and do things differently.
Thank you for sharing that. Patricia, how did Philadelphia Works attain the resources needed to launch your regional Second Chance Hiring Initiative? And what role will Philadelphia Works play in convening local business leaders around this? I know you said employers approached y'all for a while. Is that still the case? Are y'all having to kind of seek out more employers? Like, how is that working out?
Yeah, so luckily we have a funder locally that is interested in this work in particular. So the GPMC Foundation is interested in this space. So they were able to bring this opportunity forward to us. Really important thing about partnerships there. They are absolutely a funder that works with folks that they know, that they are familiar with. that they're, you know, familiar with the work. So when this opportunity came to be, they were, you know, aware of some of the work that the partners in the area, Envoy, were doing, and said like, hey, might you guys be interested in supporting this? We have a industry partnership here in the Philadelphia region called SEPMA, the Southeast PA Manufacturer Association. So this has been a long-standing, or alliance, sorry, not association. This has been a long-standing industry partnership with very committed advanced manufacturing in employers that bring often to this group like their struggles, their woes, and are able to kind of come together to develop some shared solutions. So that's our first effort there. So we're able to utilize that as a kind of an existing convening of employers that we'll pull from first to begin this work. And then our partnership with others like the Chamber of Commerce and then other employers that we are working with in either manufacturing or like industries will be convened in other ways to do this as well. So we'll act as that convener, the liaison, that relationship builder between the two.
Awesome. And then Brandy, as we've seen in Pennsylvania and elsewhere, chambers of commerce often collaborate closely with workforce boards to accomplish shared workforce goals. Does the Kentucky Chamber work with the Kentucky Workforce Innovation Board? What are kind of the strengths of each in convening businesses in your area around these initiatives and other initiatives as well?
Sure. So actually, our senior vice president of our foundation sits on the Kentucky Workforce Board. And so that plays a huge role, not only in the two-way communication between the workforce board and the chamber and what we've got going on, but also with the employers that are at the table with those workforce development boards. So I think it's an integral part of making this all work, is being that advocate for these businesses, but also keeping in mind what's going on with the partner organization. So I think that partnership is absolutely critical to make this work. I think businesses are still trying to navigate these waters, and we're trying to help them do that. And so both of these entities are a very trusted source when you're looking at business models, and businesses trust these sources. So I think it's a good way for us to kind of play that middle man between recovery centers, incarceration institutions, partner organizations. It just really kind of helps that two-way communication. So yes, we are involved in the KWIB. It is a great route for communication for all the organizations. And it also kind of helps us keep from duplicating work. We do a lot of the same things. And so how can we share that information and make the most of all of our time? We're not out of the workforce issue either. And so, how do we share our information to where we can get the most bang for our buck?
Awesome. And then a question for both of you. What advice would you give to other workforce board leaders and chamber leaders who are really considering starting this if they don't have something like this in their community already? What advice would you give them on convening local employers? And, to your point just a second ago, Brandy, bringing everyone to the table, because I feel like that is a unique role that workforce boards and chambers play.
I think really capitalizing on the economic space that we're in right now and utilizing those really existing relationships. This is a time that employers are really, desperately in need of talent. So using that to put a positive spin on, like, yes, we've got this talent pool. So I think that really using that to your advantage is imperative at this time. And I've said it a million times, but partnership here is the only way that we're going to get to a space that is successful.
I'll piggyback off that. I agree completely. I think one of the things that we've done that's very, very unique is in our I guess, quest to get this fair chance employment model going for businesses. You know, our role right now is we're training businesses to be prepared for what happens when you hire fair chance employees, and how does that culture need to be there? What resources do you need? But in order for that to happen, you really have to know what resources are available in that community. And Kentucky is a very vast, from Pikeville to Paducah is a long way. And so between those spots, there are very, very unique things in each community that are challenges and barriers. And so I sit on the communities that we're working in now, I sit on their local workforce board. And so that really gives me a look at what the workforce is looking at. But then another initiative that we do is our plan events, which are our partners learning, appreciation, and networking events. And so we convene the partners, not the businesses. We convene them first. I need to know what recovery capital is available in your community. I need to know the person that, if you're reaching out to a Goodwill partner, who is the person in my community that I reach out to? So our first step in our initiative is to create those plan events, get our partner organizations going, figure out who's doing what in the community. And then we basically are making a resource guide for our employers. You know, these non-HR issues quickly become HR issues. And so how do we make the businesses prepared, not only for their justice involved and those that have substance use disorder, but just for their general employees? How do they make a supportive work environment for all employees? And I think that helps kind of create that culture and reduce that stigma. So if anything, I would, convene those partners, learn who's in that community and where are you lacking? Do you have no food insecurity? No one with homelessness or houselessness. And so what's available in your community? Where are you missing something? So I would suggest that going forward in this work is knowing what the platform is and the partnerships that are available in the community.
Thank you both for that advice. I'm going to see if Jesse can hop back on and see if the audience has any questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. I have one for y'all just off the bat. We'll probably take one or two from the audience as well if there are any. But in y'all's opinion, what is the most unique asset that a workforce development board has access to that can help a second chance initiative in your region? And that can be access to funding. It could be anything that other entities don't necessarily have access to.
I think the ability to leverage and braid different pieces of funding to sort of make something that might be piecemeal into something whole. It's not like we're relying on one single thing to run a specific program. We've got WIOA, maybe some foundation funding, maybe some other state or federal funding. So I think that sort of menu of funding options is unique, and it helps us to be able to piece things together differently than others might be able to.
Yeah, Patricia, I think it's a great answer. I would say something similar. I mean, I think the place that workforce boards exist in the market, I think, is unique. And I'll speak very generically here. I hope you'll get the main point. We're not purely a social service or human service organization because we're embedded in a demand-driven market economy where one of our customers is a business, right? So we got to deliver for our business. Yet at the same time, we're not a staffing agency in the sense where we are just simply filling job orders, but rather we have a perspective of building career pathways, establishing a holistic support network, doing right by our job seekers. That's more than just getting a job, but rather maybe looking to build a career. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're not either of the two extremes, which have their place and they're very important. But I think there's an important role for that intermediary, and Patricia, to that point, being able to blend and braid and piece together the funding streams. Sort of on the back end, we take care of that so that the job seeker facing services are seamless and efficient.
I'll plus one both of those. I will say I think one of the biggest advantages that both the chambers and the workforce boards have in their pocket is trust. You know, their businesses trust that model, and they know that their workforce boards are looking out for their business partnerships and their interests. And so I think it also plays an important role. We have seen this work in our favor quite a bit, is that person, that in-between person that can provide that communication. I'll give you an instance. We had set up a great model, what we thought was perfect. And we saw it just started kind of dwindling apart. And we were like, what is happening? And it goes back to that technology that you were talking about. We had some folks that were set up to do call center type work, but nobody had trained them how to use 2 screens. And so that small little thing kind of made things start falling apart. And so the employer did not want to go to the partner organization and be like, you all aren't doing it right. And the other organization was like, our people don't know how to do this job, you know. So it was just a great way for us to communicate that small little thing that made such a huge difference to keep that going. So I think the trust and the communication piece is huge.
Thank you. A couple questions from the chat. What is the largest barrier to Second Chance Initiative, and how have you overcome it? Does one person want to take that? That way we can see if there's another person that can answer the apprenticeship question.
I'm happy to jump in here, unless Patricia and Brandy, you want to take it. Yes, the largest barrier. I mean, I think going back to my comments with Matt was there's still a lot of work to do around the stigma and perception of this, right? So again, we were just talking about this as a team recently. There was a sort of a list of fair chance hiring friendly employers in our region. And we were looking at this and those employers even put their hand up and said, hey, we're fair chance hiring friendly, we'll take anyone. And lo and behold, what that really meant was they were essentially using and abusing the system a little bit to say, all right, we'll bring these folks in, but then basically treat them terribly and pay them incredibly low wages, right? So I mean, it was almost it was a stigma around this is a cheap source of labor, and that's not the heart and spirit of this. You know, relatedly, we'll have employers that will say, and this is all anonymous here, right, for a reason. You know, they bring folks in, they find out that they're on work release, right, after they're saying, hey, we're fair chance, and then they find out they're on work release, and then they cut their wages by 50%. So this is again a barrier of stigma and perception. And to Mel's question, how have we overcome it? I don't think we've figured that out, but one thing that we do is that we establish parameters around what we mean by supporting fair chance hiring. And those behaviors from employers are something that we want to coach and provide technical assistance, but we also want to make sure that we're not throwing our weight behind sort of unfair, unethical practices, right? So we will remove those participants out, or we will back out from that work if we see that sort of thing happening. So I'm not sure if we've been able to overcome it, but it's definitely a challenge, and it's something that we've set parameters around. This is the way that we do it the right way, and we're not going to do it any differently.
Thank you, Jesse. Brandy, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, you know, one of the things that we've that you don't think about often is the benefits cliff. In Kentucky, it's significant. And so there's a fine line between giving these people employment and paying them a equitable wage, but then also running that fine line of them not losing their benefits in the process to be able to finish that recovery work. And so we've been kind of tiptoeing around that. There are some solutions to that. You know, we have started with some absenteeism, filling in for absenteeism, which is a great thing for an employer. You know, how do you get a sub to do the, work, especially in manufacturing? And then that gives them some on-the-job training. So I think some of those things like benefits cliff and those initiatives really have to be thought out thoroughly before jumping right into the boat. So.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, I think we'll jot down the other questions that were asked and follow up with everyone separately. Zach, we do have some case studies that we can share with you around the question that you asked. And also we can get some info on apprenticeships as well. So I want to thank you, Brandy, Patricia, and Jesse, for your time and all the great work that you're doing. Thank you so much. And then, yeah, we'll continue the conversation and go into a quick little deep dive on the actual toolkit that we have. So Matt, if you don't mind joining me, we'll delve into the actual toolkit itself. So the toolkit starts off with a rationale for second chance hiring. This will help community partners speak with companies. It'll help companies internally make the business case for second chance hiring. So it's just really a quick little section that helps us kind of set the foundation for starting a second chance hiring initiative. The toolkit is then divided into 5 stages for program development, implementation, and sustainability. The first stage is plan. The stage focuses on setting the foundation for the second chance hiring program. It encourages you to identify your goals, map out your local support ecosystem, and define parameters of success. Second stage is partner. In this stage, you engage with local partners identified in your ecosystem, including manufacturers. Using this industry sector partnership approach truly helps community partners maximize and align limited resources that they have access to. The third stage is equip. In this stage, community partners should help employers get smart about obtaining the necessary knowledge and foundation for a strong second chance hiring program. This includes ensuring that employers are equipped with data and knowledge to make their business case, start changing internal policies for a safer and more inclusive environment, and developing strategies for recruitment and retention of second chance individuals. Fourth stage is implement, where you're putting stage 3 into practice, essentially getting the ecosystem to work, have the community partner to manufacturer referral system worked out, and have necessary employee supports in place on the community partner side and the manufacturer side. The 5th and final stage is sustain. In the spirit of manufacturing and continuous improvement, this is where you can tweak the program and how it is set up, add more employers, find champions in the community to spread the word, and identify funding opportunities to keep the work going. I'm going to pass it over to Matt to go into a little more detail on each of these stages.
Great. Thanks, Pooja. And I'll just say as we start, it's so nice to have great examples from each of those stages within the panels that we've had. I think you've heard illustrated by the 3 leaders that we heard from just what this looks like in practice. So this is a bit of a refresher course, but we also, as Pooja said, want to have it available as a resource to folks to bring to your communities and think about how to enact these initiatives. So just quickly on defining success, I think as we were collectively putting the toolkit together, I think there's a few goals we had. One is just creating this gathering space, right? So community ecosystem where you've got a hub for expertise and for leadership and for employers and community organizations, you know, corrections, workforce to come to the same table and think about what second chance means to them. The second is really practice changes. So a lot of this does mean employers figuring out how to hire and how to update their HR practices, how to update their recruiting practices, and make second chance a part of their talent strategy. And the last is partnership building. And I think everyone has touched on this, of the importance of building these long-term sustaining partnerships between the reentry community and the employer community that can last above and beyond, you know, any sort of programming that's built through the ecosystems. Go to the next slide. So I won't stay on here long, but only to say we've seen some great examples of these ecosystems, and most importantly, a really diverse set of what we would call hub organizations, right? So the entities that are convening and bringing folks together. So there are chambers that lead this work. There are certainly workforce boards that lead this work. We've seen employers step up and play a leadership role in convening. We've seen county government lead employers and organizations. So it doesn't have to be one entity, but I think as we've heard from the group, workforce boards do have this kind of unique position between employers and job seekers to help lead efforts. Go to the next slide. So Brandy, I will just say, I love that you really set the stage for this first section. So the plan meetings that you organize in Kentucky, I think are exactly what we would suggest as kind of the first step, is getting to know your local ecosystem, your local providers, really, you know, who the different folks are that need to be at the table, whether that's folks working in recovery or community organizations, certainly the employers. But Stage one, we really see as the hub organization, sort of understanding where leadership lies in the community. That can be employer leadership, that can be workforce leadership, it could be corrections, it could be a mayor or a governor, but being able to identify kind of the epicenters of this work and bring them together. And then the second stage goes a step deeper. And so as we think about what it means to partner with this and for a lead organization to find the right partners, I think two of the obvious places to start are finding employers, right, who really have a predisposition to want to lead in this area. So Patricia mentioned, sector partnerships and having already some traction within the manufacturing sector in southeastern Pennsylvania. Jesse mentioned a couple of individual employers that have built this into their talent strategy. So I think part of the role of the hub organization is to figure out, which employers can really kind of lead the way and encourage their peers to implement Second Chance, and hopefully, be a consistent place where job seekers can find opportunities and can be a model for others. And then the second on the community partners is just figuring out, where there are organizations in your community that could be a real resource to those employers. And I think as we do that matchmaking between reentry and workforce and employers, making sure that employers have a good experience and feel like they're well supported by organizations, they're being referred candidates that have opportunities to succeed. So there's some vetting, I think, that the hub organizations really can lead in. Pooja detailed what we mean when we say equip. I think it's really just about enabling particularly the employers in your community to be able to, one, make the case internally, to understand the business case for Second Chance hiring, and to be able to have those conversations with their HR leaders, with their legal teams, with their executives, to build this into their practice. The second is to be able to show folks where they may need to make adaptations to policies and practices to enable their Second Chance strategies to work. And then the last is really helping with what are those recruitment pipelines, those talent pipelines that you can find in the community to be your source of great candidates. As we go to the fourth stage, so really this is what we see as the end goal of these ecosystems is implementation, right? Is employers beginning to work with community partners to hire. So I think that really means supporting those employers to figure out who are the right organizations to work with, what training might they need, what types of employees, what skills might they need, and be able to do that matchmaking, and then bringing those employers together to learn from each other. And I think where we've seen a lot of success in these ecosystems is employers really coming to the table together and being able to share what's worked, what hasn't, best practices, just helping really be able to sort of encourage and motivate one another to do this work and hopefully demystify what Second Chance means to an employer. And then the last piece is sustained, and I'll end here just to say that I think this is part of why workforce boards are such a great convener, is that you have the longevity to do this for a long period of time, to bring in new employers, to create these communities of practice. And so even if there's an initial real push at this stage to build a Fair Chance initiative or Second Chance initiative, I think the opportunity to build that into what the workforce board offers both its job seekers and its employers is an exciting opportunity as we go. So I'm going to, if we go to the next slide, quickly pass it to my colleague Cassie to do perhaps an abbreviated version of what implementation looks like for these ecosystems.
Thanks, Matt. I'm really excited to be here today and to get to be a part of this conversation. It's always great to be with DMI. And really round out, you've heard kind of what do you do in this instance? And now I get to talk about the how. We have been working with DMI throughout their work on the toolkit, and really excited to kind of talk about one of the outcomes of that, which is this series. We have the pleasure of working with Patricia in Philadelphia, as well as Jesse in South Central Pennsylvania, as well as doing this work across Ohio to do this implementation series. series. So what are our goals with the implementation series? It's a lot of what you've heard today. So modernizing those HR practices, everything from recruitment to background checks to individual assessments, and really working with a group of employers to help them modernize those practices. Also building those talent partnerships, which you've heard a lot about today. I know that you've heard the word partnership probably more than you have the whole year today, but that really is such an important key. And as we do this implementation series in communities, that is one of the most important components that we embed into our implementation series. And then lastly, as part of this, it's learning from peer employers. So bringing together a group of 8 to 12 employers within a community and a hub organization to learn from each other, and also to learn from organizations across the country who've been successful in this. So we also bring in guest speakers as a big part of this as well. If we can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, there's multiple different partners who come together to build this implementation series in a community. You have the hub organization, which in the case of Philly and South Central PA, that is the workforce board. In Ohio, that is the local association. It really looks different in every community just based on who is that convener in the local area. We bring together that group of 8 to 12 employers who are all engaged throughout the entire series, working together and learning together. Those expert speakers from across the country who have implemented this either themselves or help support employers as they've implemented fair chance or second chance practices, the community partners, as I mentioned, and then us as a team at Envoy, who has developed this curriculum and helps facilitate this series of peer learning. Because we've gotten to do this with lots of employers previously, we've really pulled together the best practices and helped manage the delivery of the series in partnership with the convener. So next slide. So what does this look like in practice? I said it's typically 8 to 12 employers coming together. And typically it's about 8 modules, but we are happy to customize based on the needs of the local ecosystem. But we start with kind of the recruitment process where we really find those high quality engaged employers in the community in partnership with the local hub organization. And then we kick off the cohort with really the case making, understanding the landscape of the justice system and what is the justice system. A lot of employers aren't as familiar, and so we spend a lot of time in that space. And then once we get to module 2, we're talking about communication. What does it look like to talk about this internally as a company and externally? And then module 3 and module 5 are both similar in that we spend a lot of time with employers, making them feel comfortable about the HR policies and practices, helping them understand how to have conversations with their background check providers, all with the goal of module 4, building those talent pipelines, and ultimately reporting out on successes and challenges at the end, but also continuously doing that obviously along the way too. I'll touch on the SHRM curriculum in a moment, but we can go to the next slide. So what does this look like from a convener standpoint and from the participants? We typically have 2 to 3 individuals from the employer who are engaged in the implementation series throughout the entire engagement. And they have access to what we call the Fair Chance Hub. The Fair Chance Hub is composed of the roadmap, which you see on the right, which has each of the modules that we'll be spending time with them on, and really all of the resources and activities and truly the step-by-step components to be able to really implement Fair Chance. This really is kind of a support system for the employers who are in the cohort or in the series together. They can take it back to their employer, use it to educate other members who maybe aren't joining the series, and ultimately really do have the tools within this hub to create the changes necessary to be a second chance employer, and also to both hire and retain this amazing talent. So if we go to the next slide. Quickly, I'll just run through these, just the building blocks. I've kind of already touched on all of them. The key one here is that foundational curriculum up front. SHRM has a curriculum called Getting Talent Back to Work, which is a free online resource that we really think is essential for that basic knowledge. And so we've embedded that as an expectation as part of our series. We also have our modules, as I mentioned, that have those 6 to 9 facilitated sessions with us and with guest speakers, office hours and coaching. So we hand in hand with the convener hub organization, spend time talking directly one-on-one with employers and also provide that real support along the way. And then we help find those local community partners who are going to work with the employers directly. So with that, I'll turn it back to Pooja, but very excited to talk more about this as a tool for local communities.
Thank you so much, Matt and Cassie. While it takes work on all sides, there are a multitude of resources that we at the MI and other national partners have developed in this process. We've linked many of those resources throughout the toolkit, and we have additional resources on the MI's website that include community partnership scorecards, previous webinars, case studies, and many other resources. These can also give you more insight into how other companies and community partners have approached and implemented second chance hiring initiatives. So we really hope that this toolkit helps many more communities and companies start their second chance hiring journey. Envoy is another great resource. They've been a tremendous partner to us in almost 3 years of us doing this work with manufacturers. Please feel free to reach out to us at secondchance@nam.org with any questions, and continue to monitor our website for the latest resources and events. Thank you to all of our speakers for sharing such great insights today and for the incredible work that you're doing. All of our work is supported by Stand Together Trust. We thank them for their partnership support and the work that they continue to do in advancing second chance hiring nationwide. And thank all of you for joining us today as well.